There's this other thing since I mentioned Mercedes and Toni, and there's really no other opportunity to talk about Mercedes in this review because she wasn't featured on the show at all. Toni did pop up on the show, but not with anything having to do with Mercedes. I keep seeing this thing, and I'm not on Twitter nearly as much as I used to be in my heyday. I'm not even on Twitter nearly as much as I was a year ago or 6 months ago, as I continue to just not be attracted to the site anymore, and having totally broken the habit. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer for dumb narratives to bounce back to me, and a lot of times I see things at places like YouTube or our Discord, where people will talk about things going on social media before I actually see them on Twitter. Especially since I also have unfollowed a lot of wrestling accounts. Like when I do go to Twitter, I'm going there for like baseball and college basketball and inappropriate jokes and shit like that. Um, but there's this sort of thing going around, and granted, it's from some of the dumbest people imaginable. Some of them being analysts and pundits, that Mercedes Moné never losing is a massive problem, and she must have some kind of creative control in her contract, and what an egomaniac, and how come she never loses. And I mean, what are we doing? Why should Mercedes lose? Who should she have lost to along the way here? I mean, if you beat Mercedes with, and this is no disrespect to any of the people I'm going to mention, if you had been beating Mercedes all of this time over the last year plus that she's been in the company with your I don't know, your Chris Statlanders or your Willow Nightingales or your Athenas, or some other people that she has wrestled, or some other people that she hasn't wrestled yet. And she's been, dropping L's every night. Every other pay per view, she takes an L. Um, this match against Toni Storm wouldn't feel and wouldn't be as big as it is. The whole point of this thing is Toni Storm, the world champion, who went through this war with Mariah May for 18 months or whatever it was, in what has now proven, with the benefit of hindsight, to be the most important women's feud in the history of the company. And they had two of the biggest, if not the two biggest, women's matches in the history of the company. And I say that as someone who, for the most part, until the very tail end of it, did not enjoy the feud. But there's a time and place for my opinions, and there's a time and place to just talk reality. And I think over the years, over the last 15 years or whatever it is doing this show, I think Rich and I do that very well, telling you what we think about something personally, and what we think about something in terms of what it's going to do for the business, and the big picture. And you have to be able to parse those things out and have all of those conversations, right? So setting my biases aside, of the early days of the Timeless Tony character, and the vast majority of the feud with Mariah May, they had two of the biggest women's matches in the history of the company, and it's the most important and vital feud that the women's division ever saw in AEW, right? So then Toni Storm has elevated herself to not just one of the two biggest women's stars in the company, and one of the biggest women's stars in America. She's one of the biggest stars in the company, period. And she's featured all over the place on TV, because they know that she's a minute by minute draw and all of those things. So you have Toni Storm on one side as the world champion, that you have Mercedes on the other side, who, yes, she's undefeated, and she's been doing a belt collector gimmick, but that's kind of the point. Why are people complaining that she hasn't lost matches? This match with Toni wouldn't feel nearly as big if she had lost matches here or there along the way. Again, no disrespect to Athena or Willow or Statlander, whoever you want to name in the division who she's beaten, or they haven't programmed her with yet, or whoever you think she should have lost to. They're not Mercedes Moné. And they weren't being built to be one half of the biggest women's match, and one of the biggest matches that this company has put together in its history, on one of the biggest shows in the history of the company, and what has become their tentpole event, All In. While Toni was going through this long feud with Mariah May, Mercedes was kept at that orbit, and she was collecting belts, and she was staying undefeated in preparation of this huge match with Toni Storm. That's kind of the point. She doesn't have any creative control. Multiple reporters have debunked that. I've asked around, and nobody has lent any credibility or to that theory. She doesn't have any creative control. To use another overused phrase, I don't know who needs to hear this, but the reason Mercedes Moné is undefeated and never loses is because that's called a push. I know, it's crazy, but we call that a push. Back in the day, crazy days, when promoters and bookers wanted to push someone, there was this crazy concept. You know how they would achieve that and push someone? They'd win all their matches. I know that sounds nuts. I know a lot of fans, a lot of modern fans, because they were taught this by one specific company, think that people have to trade wins all the time, that everyone should get a turn with the belt, 50-50 booking, all of those things. That's shit. That's garbage. If you want to push somebody, the best way to push someone is to have them win all of their fucking matches. It's time tested. It works. It's the best way to do it. Not trade wins with Chris Statlander. I mean, it's crazy some of this shit that I see from some of these awful YouTubers. You know who they are. Ah, the ego on Mercedes. Oh, she must have creative control. Oh, she never wants to lose a match. First of all, it's not up to her. Try to keep up. Do a little research. Call somebody. Maybe no one wants to talk to you because, but at least try to get some sources. Secondly, again, it's called the push. And now here we are. How much bigger is this match? Because Mercedes hasn't taken any L's, and she's got 1,000 belts over her shoulder and around her waist coming into it. And now she's coming for the one belt that has eluded her in the Tony Khan extended universe of promotions and promotional partners. The AEW World title, held by the biggest women's star in the world right now, Toni Storm. It doesn't get any bigger or better than that. This is booking 101 on how to build a big match. Everything that AEW has done with Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné to lead to this moment in July in Texas at All In has been masterclass booking by Tony Khan. There is no other analysis to be had. And if you don't think this is masterclass booking by Tony Khan, you're lost and you don't have a clue. You couldn't have built these two sides up any better to have their eventual match than what Tony did with Toni Storm, what Tony did with Mercedes, leading to this moment in July. Master class booking. Perfection. There is no, and this is not an opinion. There is no other opinion. You cannot hold another opinion. You cannot make an argument that Mercedes trading wins for the last year with other people on the roster would have made more sense than this, because it doesn't.